26. I live in the UK and I just got diagnosed as autistic a week ago, and I make videos documenting my journey. If you see some fur over here, that's because my cat Walt has decided to join me for today's video. I wanted to make probably the last update that I'll ever make on my diagnosis journey, because if you watch my last video, I officially got diagnosed a week ago today, which I can't believe it. It went by so fast. So I wanted to make one more video where I talk about how I've been feeling since getting my diagnosis, and also sharing my the report that I got from my psychiatrist. The past week has been quite difficult. It's hard for me to put my emotions into words sometimes, so I might not make a lot of sense, or I know it's not always very clear what I'm trying to say when I talk about my feelings and stuff. Over the past week, I've been feeling, I guess I haven't felt as good as I hoped I would, and I'm trying to be 100% real, right? Because I want this to be authentic. I want you to know what to expect, and your experience might be completely different, but for me at least, I expected getting my official diagnosis as something that would put my mind at peace and like bring me a lot of confirmation and validation, and just allow me to move forward with my life. And mind you, it's only been 1 week, but it hasn't really been the case so far. I've been feeling very stressed, struggling to relax a bit, like just struggling to take deep breaths, which I have that. I've always had that when I'm stressed. I've been having that basically all day, every day this past week, or most days. And even when I'm in a good mood, even when I don't, like, my thoughts aren't stressed and I'm feeling good, my body is stressed. I can feel it. It makes me more irritable than usual. My sleep hasn't been the best either. I had another of those meltdown episodes. I don't really know. I'm still not clear on what my meltdowns look like, what my shutdowns look like. In the past, I've had episodes that I used to categorize as temper tantrums when I was a kid, and then I had episodes that I would categorize as panic attacks, and then I had episodes that I would categorize as migraines. For the past 15 years, probably, I've been getting, maybe longer than that, but I've been conscious of them for the past 15 years or so. Once every year, once every 2 years, I'll get these migraine episodes, where migraines with aura, I think it's called, where my vision will get funny, and then I'll start feeling numb, usually in my fingers and my mouth. And in the worst case scenario, when it's the most extreme, it affects my speech, my thoughts, my cognitive function, if you will. I haven't been formally diagnosed with migraines, but when I look at the symptoms online, it describes my experience perfectly. And then afterwards, I'll have a dull headache for a couple days that, painkillers don't have any effect on. And I've had those during very stressful times in my life. Actually, I had an episode a few weeks ago, and it was the first time in 2 years. I hadn't had one in 2 years. I was hopeful that I wasn't gonna get them anymore, but I did. Like, I'm not saying those might be something other than migraines, because I know they're migraines, but I'm saying it might have something to do with my autism, because I always get them when I'm emotionally overwhelmed, or when I'm in situations of overstimulation, or social overwhelm. There might be a link there. I've heard that a lot of autistic people have similar migraine episodes, and I know that a lot of us have other, things that in common that are not part of the official diagnosis criteria, but we still share a lot of these experiences, like hypermobile joints, EDS, things like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if migraines were just another thing that a lot of autistic people have in common. All that to say that it's still not clear in my head what's happening most of the time when I have episodes of distress. The other night, it took me a really long time to fall asleep, and then as I get older, I've realized that if I get past a certain point of the night without falling asleep, I want to say 3 a.m., I start to feel it in my body. And whenever there's something off with my body, I'm panicked. I get into full panic mode. I guess you could. I used to think it was like a form of health anxiety. My dad has the same thing, and he's not diagnosed, but I highly suspect he's autistic like me. Yeah, I think it has to do with being hypersensitive, I guess. It's just maybe there are sensations in your body that neurotypical people wouldn't necessarily be aware of. Some of us are very aware of what's going on in our bodies, and so it can trigger a lot of anxiety. And I think that's what's happening with me in those moments. Basically, past a certain time, my body starts to feel numb, or like, I don't know how to describe the sensation. If it's like numb or if it's like tingling all over, but basically my whole body. Maybe it's part of restless leg syndrome. I have no clue what's going on, but it's a very uncomfortable sensation, and it's like it's like I can feel the discomfort in the pit of my stomach almost, and it's like I can't ignore it. I can't think of anything else. I was lying in bed waiting for it to pass, feeling so uncomfortable, and I was like, you know what? I need to get up and do something about it. So I did the same thing I mentioned in my other video. I came downstairs, I danced for a bit, I moved my body, I stimmed, played with the cats, and eventually went back to bed, read for a bit, listened to some ASMR, and I eventually fell back asleep. Yeah, I can tell that there's a lot going on. I can tell that even when I'm not consciously processing my diagnosis, my new diagnosis, at the back of my mind, it's actively processing, like unconsciously, and that's why I feel so stressed. Even when consciously, at least, I feel okay. My body's stressed. Obviously, an autism diagnosis is a big thing. Obviously, it requires a lot of processing. Like, I was optimistic, thinking that I would just get my diagnosis and put it away in a box and live my life. Not that I would forget about it or be in denial, but like really embrace it and start my new life. I guess it's not that simple. My imposter syndrome has been the worst it's ever been. I think the culminating point was yesterday. What are you doing, baby? Make up your mind. Aw, you're so cute. I think it was also triggered by the report that my psychiatrist sent me, which I'm going to talk about in a little while, which I was actually quite disappointed with it. It's a combination of that and reading, people leaving comments and like contacting me on Instagram talking about their experience, which has been great. I'm so happy to have this connection with the community that I didn't have before, and all of your messages and comments have been super positive and supportive. I'm so thankful. But I guess that's also activated my imposter syndrome. One of the main things that have made me doubt my diagnosis is the fact that I have childhood trauma, and my the psychiatrist who diagnosed me seemed to really gloss over that, not even asking me any questions about my trauma, my abuse. So that, and I hear that some people can't even get a diagnosis because they have childhood trauma, and then they're told we can't say for sure if what you have is like autism or if it's complex PTSD that mimics autistic traits. And that just confuses the hell out of my brain. There are, like, I had made peace with that prior to my diagnosis. I had come to the conclusion that I do have childhood trauma, but there's also a whole aspect of myself that can't be explained by childhood trauma, and that can only be explained by autism. And I was really at peace with that. But my freaking imposter syndrome came back and disrupted everything again. So I've had to do this whole process again. And it's part of perseverance, I think it's called, right? This aspect of autism that is linked to, honestly, to repetitive behaviors and monotropism and stuff like that, which is just focusing on something over and over again. I've mentioned it in other videos. I do that a lot. I've done that my whole life. Especially if it's something that's very emotional, very important to me, I'll focus on it and come back to it over and over and over and over again in my head, and I can't seem to be able to move forward. And this is what I've been dealing with that again, which is really frustrating, especially since it's about something as important as my autism. It affects my identity as a person. It's not something I can just disregard and just put at the back of my mind and do other stuff. I can't think about anything else. I've been going through everything in my head again, talking about it with my partner, going through stuff I've already gone through, reprocessing everything, because my brain needs certainty. And if there's the slightest doubt, I can't deal with it. The other thing that has triggered my imposter syndrome is, like I said, the report that I received from my psychiatrist. First of all, she said it would take up to 2 weeks to send it, and it only took a couple of working days. So I had my assessment last Wednesday, and I think I received my report on Monday. So it sounds like I'm complaining about it. I'm glad that I received it so soon. But maybe I wish she hadn't rushed through it so much. Like, I'd rather wait a bit longer and get something that's thorough than something that's been rushed just so I can receive it within a couple days. And I mean, obviously her English isn't her first language. It's not my first language either. But I just, and that's my perfectionism talking. The document that she sent me, I'm trying not to be judgmental because it's not what's important here, but also I can't ignore it. And to me, that's linked to like professionalism. But her document is so full of like errors, and like it looks like she didn't check what she wrote afterwards, and she wrote it in a hurry, and there are some things that are not accurate. I mentioned that in the past, but she'll write things like that I've always struggled a lot with my sleep, which I never said that. Like, never. I never uttered those words. So I don't know where she's getting that from, but that's like, I'm really nitpicking here because it's probably a 5-page document. That's the one thing that really stuck with me, when the brain has a tendency to focus on really small negative details and overlook the whole positive picture. But I guess my expectations were too high for that report. I really expected it to explain to me why she diagnosed me, basically. Because we didn't really go into too much detail over the phone, because she said, I'm gonna send you a detailed report. So I was like, fine. But the report was basically a summary of all the information I gave her during our calls and through over the questionnaire that I sent. She basically summarized everything I said, and at the end she said that I meet the criteria for autism spectrum disorder, and then some advice and recommendations. And I was like, yeah, but like I need to know more. Like I need to know what makes you think that it's autism and not just childhood trauma. Like what is it that I wrote that convinced you? What, like I need more information. I can't just be like, yep, you're autistic, I'm not going to tell you why. I trust that she knows what she's talking about. It's her job. I chose her because she's specialized in autism. She followed the official criteria, blah blah blah. I don't doubt her skills. I just wish for my own peace of mind that I had been given more information. And I am gonna send her an email, probably with some questions. I'm also waiting for her to send me a shorter version of my report, basically just a one-page document saying, confirming my diagnosis, so that I can share that with my GP and all the relevant people I need to share it with, so that I don't have to share this very private, personal 5-page document whenever I want to prove my diagnosis. Also, something else that she did that didn't sit right with me, that might just be my PDA, but during the assessment we mentioned therapies that might help, the possibility that I might benefit from getting therapy with therapists who know about autism, and I was all for it. And she mentioned Autism Unraveled and Problem Shared, which I linked in my previous video. And so she said, if need be for insurance, I'll say that it's for your mental health, not for autism, because insurance doesn't cover therapy for autism. It only covers therapy for mental health. And so we had this discussion, and in my mind, I was like, when I'm ready, I will look for a therapist and like do the whole process then. So in my head, with my PDA, right, with my persistent persistent drive for autonomy, I thought, it's great. When the time comes, I will look for a therapist who knows about autism, blah blah blah. And then she sent me an email with my report, and she sent me another email saying, oh, we've referred you to someone from our clinic who specializes in autism. And that so activated my PDA. I was like, how dare you? How dare you refer me for. And basically, whenever I get referred for something, if I haven't explicitly asked to be referred, I end up canceling the referral, because it like triggers such a visceral response in my nervous system whenever it feels like someone is pushing me to do something. She said, oh, we've referred to someone from our clinic. So I was like, first of all, what was the point of recommending me to all these organizations if you're going to refer me to someone from your clinic that I haven't chosen? So then I was like, oh, here we go. They're like, I don't know how to say that in English, but basically she's recommending one of her colleagues, and like that's how it goes. So I don't know, it didn't give me a very good first impression, and I was like, I'm gonna cancel it, because like honestly, like, hold on, I'm not ready to do therapy just now. I've just now learned that I'm autistic. Like I need some time. Like I don't like it when I feel like someone's forcing my hand, I've pulled out my report letter here so I can read some bits and pieces for you. there's a background and reason for consultation that explains why I contacted her in the first place, why I requested a diagnosis in the first place. So basically, yeah, the document is 7 pages long and it's basically just summarizing everything I said. Then there's a part about the consultation. Like, again, she said that the consultation was on the 9th of February. It was on the 7th of February, which I know, like, I'm nitpicking, those things aren't important, but to me, it makes it seem very unprofessional. And I'm like, I got my diagnosis from someone who can't even bother to check that the date on the document is right. Like, I don't know, it feels wrong to me. And then she basically goes through all the criteria for diagnosis. It says, I followed the Royal College of Psychiatrists interview guide for the diagnostic assessment of able adults with autism spectrum disorder. So, reciprocal social communication and social interaction, deficits in social emotional reciprocity, informant information, difficulties in nonverbal communication, informant information. So for each category and each subcategory of the diagnostic criteria, she mentions what I told her, her own impressions, and then the information from my partner and from like my childhood, deficits in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships. And then part 2, restricted repetitive patterns of behavior, stereotype repetitive movements, motor, objects, speech, insistence on sameness, restricted fixated interests, sensory hyper or hyporeactivity. And then there's the mental health examination, which is really odd. Pauline is a 26-year-old French lady. First of all, I told her, like, first thing I told her was that I don't feel strongly about my gender, and one of her areas of interest, her areas of specialization is gender identity. So I think it's a little odd that she refers to me as a lady when I explicitly said that I don't feel strongly about my gender, and like she knows about gender identity. I'm just gonna put it out there. Pauline is a 26-year-old French lady who was dressed appropriately for the weather. She made little eye contact throughout. Her speech was monotonous in tone, but at times quite animated. She was articulate and gave thoughtful answers to questions. She has struggled with sleep for a long time. Her appetite is okay. Her mood was objectively euthemic. I had to look that up. With slightly anxious effect. I like the slightly anxious effect. Because I was more than slightly anxious, but obviously from the outside it might not look like it. There were no abnormal beliefs or perceptions. She had insight into her difficulties. And then it says observation. Using the above criteria in the context of this reported, also something else that really bothers me is like it seems to come from a template, which I understand. But then sometimes it says his or he, and sometimes it says her and she, and it doesn't feel consistent. It doesn't feel personal at all. I don't know. There are so many things that I don't like about this report. Using the above criteria in the context of his reported developmental history and current presentation, there is evidence to support a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. And then it says 299.0 DSM-5. As exemplified by the reciprocal social interaction, communication, and rigidity with focal/repetitive interests. And then there's a whole list of recommendations, some more useful than others. I would advise Pauline to explore the National Autistic Society website. We all know about that. There are many helpful blogs written by people with autism. People with autism. I don't like that. So she mentions Musings of an Aspie, Autism Unraveled, which she mentioned previously, and Just Stimming. Tony Atwood is a clinical psychologist who has published on autism. He often speaks online. Some other websites that can be helpful. Oh no. I did not realize she listed Autism Speaks as one of her recommendations. Oh, that rubs me the wrong way. She even lists 2 websites, autismspeaks.org and autismspeaks.org/blog/do's don'ts after autism diagnosis. Oh, that doesn't sit right with me. I didn't even realize before I filmed this. Ooh, it's even worse than I thought. Some newly diagnosed adults find benefit in attending a local social support group. Pauline's family are also advised to explore the parents and carers section. Again, like I explicitly said multiple times that I'm not in touch with my family. Comorbid conditions such as anxiety and depression are common in persons with autism, again, not autistic people. I would advise Pauline to share with health professionals her diagnosis of autism so that they can take this into account when offering support and interventions. If Pauline discloses his diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder in future employment, she will be entitled to reasonable adjustments. This may be things such as certain changes to work practices to support her to perform his best in any role. So, two different pronouns in the same sentence, and like, I wouldn't be bothered if it felt like it was on purpose, but here it just feels like they didn't care. They didn't read through everything to check that it was written in a good way, and like I wouldn't mind if it was just like a random letter about something unimportant, about I don't know, like just a summary of a GP appointment about the flu that you had last week. But this is big, this is life-changing, and I think they could have done a better job. I'm definitely gonna write them an email after this video because I'm not happy with this. I'm happy to write a clinical report to support her, discuss his diagnosis with future employers, and describe some adjustments that can help in the workplace. Access to Work are a helpful organization who can support Pauline with workplace accommodations and adaptations advice. I will refer Pauline to therapy for managing her anxiety with a therapist experienced in autism. Also, something else that I want to mention is that every step of the way as I got my diagnosis, after my first appointment, a couple days after, I was sent a form to fill out about my feedback on my psychiatrist. I was like, I've only talked to her for like half an hour and I haven't even had my assessment yet, and I already have to give feedback. So I was like, okay, fine. And then a few days before my assessment, not after, before, I was sent another form to give feedback. I was like, okay, this is too much now. I'm not going to do this one. So it seems a bit pushy. The thing is, what I'm saying is I don't think that she isn't trustworthy or that she didn't give me an accurate diagnosis, because going into this, despite my imposter syndrome, I already knew that I'm autistic. So it's not like I had huge doubts and I was hoping for her to clarify that for me. I already knew it. I just needed a piece of paper to confirm it. It's not so much that I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can trust her judgment because she seems so unprofessional. Like, obviously it doesn't help with my imposter syndrome, but I know that I'm autistic with or without her feedback, basically. Does that make sense? What wrongs me, what rubs me the wrong way is just the sheer lack of professionalism. And this isn't even the NHS. Like, if it was the NHS, I would understand. They're really overwhelmed and stuff, and underfunded and stuff like that. This is a private clinic. She's a private psychiatrist. She's being handsomely compensated by my insurance, by my partner's work insurance. It didn't take her that long. Like, in total, I think we talked for no more than an hour and a half to 2 hours in total, including my first consultation and the actual assessment. And then she went through some of the forms that I had to fill out. That's it. It didn't require that much work, obviously, since it's so badly written. Like over the phone when we were talking, in my previous video I included snippets from my actual assessment appointment, which you can watch. I'll put a link to my video somewhere. Over the call, during the assessment, as I was talking to her out loud, face to face, I had a really good impression. Like, she sounded really knowledgeable, she sounded really understanding. She didn't sound like she was rushing through things or not doing things seriously. Or I had a really good impression. It's the report that really messed things up for me. I'm rambling here and I'm just expressing what I feel and putting my thoughts out there. I don't expect anyone to respond and say why they think that I'm autistic or not based on what I said. That's not what I'm looking for here. I'm just sharing what it's like going through an autism diagnosis and then having huge imposter syndrome. Huge imposter syndrome. This is what this is, because I wouldn't be nitpicking like this if I didn't have imposter syndrome. I'm definitely gonna write to my psychiatrist though. I'm waiting for her to send the short version of the report, so that I can reply to her. I'm gonna point out a few things. You know, I'm outspoken, and I always try to do what's right. And to me, it's not right that she recommends websites like Autism Speaks on a diagnosis report, because if you don't know much about autism, if you haven't done much research and you see that and you think it's a respectable source of information, then you're being misled. In case you don't know what Autism Speaks is, there's plenty of information online, videos about it. It's a really problematic organization that pretends to support autistic people, but in the past has done nothing but undermine the community and try to find a cure. And they've done some very problematic things in the past. So for them to recommend that, I get that it's not necessarily my psychiatrist. It might be just a template that the whole clinic uses, not just her. But still, like, it doesn't sit right with me. So I'm definitely gonna tell them that. I don't know if I'll make this. Might be the last video in my autism diagnosis journey. I've created a whole playlist with all 7 videos that I've made about it. But you never know. I might make another video a few weeks or months from now, just giving an update on how I've been feeling about my diagnosis. Right now, I think I'm done talking about just the diagnosis journey itself. From now on, I'll start making videos about autism in general, not just getting my diagnosis, if that makes sense. In my last video, I included a whole list of topics that I want to talk about. I think the next video I want to make a light-hearted one. I want to make, because I've been posting such serious content, I think I want to make one about my STEM toy collection, because it's one of the best parts about being autistic, for me at least, is like getting to buy so many STEM toys and fidget toys, and it really, I don't know, it really sparks joy. I think that's gonna be my next video. I also wanted to share, I mentioned in my last video that I ordered a badge and a sunflower lanyard, so I just wanted to share it with you because I received it. So here it is. I haven't received my badge yet, but when I do, I'm gonna put it somewhere here. As you can see, there's a card on it that says I'm autistic. And in the back, on the back, it says, "Please be patient with me, talk clearly and calmly, and do not touch me to avoid causing me distress." And then you can put your name, and with my consent or in an emergency, please contact. And you can put contact details of someone. I've also put a little fidget puppet toy here and my loop ear plugs. When I wear this out and about, I'm not gonna wear the card. I think I'm just gonna wear the lanyard with this on the end and my badge on it that says I'm autistic with a little fox, just because I don't necessarily need the card, especially if I have the badge. This is gonna come in handy when I'm out and about, especially while traveling, going through airports, stuff like that. When I go to like my medical appointments, when I go to the hospital, things like that. I'm sure it's not for everyone. I'm sure not everyone would want something like this. I personally feel like it could come in handy for me. I've put a link to it in the description of my last video if you're interested in getting one. But yeah, I'm gonna end this here. I hope that this wasn't too negative. Again, like I'm nitpicking here. I'm just sharing my thoughts out loud and the whole processing aspect of getting a diagnosis. What it feels like a week after getting my diagnosis. I'm still very much processing things, and it's still very, very fresh and new. It might seem a bit harsh, the things I said about my psychiatrist, and maybe in hindsight I'll realize that it was a bit harsh, but also like you expect the people who give you that kind of diagnosis to take their job seriously and like at least have the decency to write a report letter that doesn't have a million typos and uses the wrong pronouns all the time, and it even includes inaccurate information about the patient. Like, it's just like, come on, you know? But anyways, thanks for watching, liking, commenting, subscribing, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.